we plan this a month out, right? And so there's something that knows that we don't. And we have to trust that because that's just what's true, right? So anyway, thank you for choosing to be here as part of this spiritual community today, whether you're physically in the theater or joining us on Zoom or live streaming or watching this sometime in the future. This week I'm going to continue talking about the theme of the oneness of all life. What possessed me to pick this a month or so ago, I still don't know. Because it's not an easy topic, right? We say it's a given. It's a basic belief of our teaching. And yet it's not something that comes easy to most people. We don't think of ourselves as one with everything. We don't think of ourselves as part of the unity of the whole. Or at least most people don't. I have moments when I get there. But because what we see in our world, if we look what's in front of our eyes, it's all this separation and division and yuck stuff. But what we know is we are one in the whole. And so is everybody else. Whether we agree with them or not, whether we like with them or not, whether they think like we think they ought to think or not. We are one with the whole, and so is everyone else. And this is it's a little challenging, right? Because it's kind of a contradiction. Because we've got this, we are one with the whole, that is basic truth, and each one of us wants to be individual and special. Okay. One with the whole and unique. And one with the whole and unique. So we've got this dichotomy, this contradiction, this paradox that's true for all beings. And we get to remember that. Because it's not the ground that everyone else walks on when they walk on the earth. And we get to remember that it is the ground that we walk on. So the question I posed in the description of today's talk was, we live in this unity and this unity lives in us. When you remember this and practice it, how does your experience of your world change? Because, you know, in the world in front of my eyes, there's an awful lot of divisiveness going on. How does my reaction, my response, my choice change when I remember I am one with everyone? What goes on for you? What goes on in your mind? What goes on in your thought process when you look around and you go, wow, look at that. You wait, they're one of me too. Or I'm one and the same. And somehow there is common ground here. No matter what. So I add a second question to that question, which is already plenty complicated. And that is, how big and inclusive is your definition of oneness? And is there anyone or anything that's outside of it? Can there really be? If there's only one. If there's only oneness, if there's only the totality of the whole that each of us is a part. That's hard too, right? And so we get to remember there is no spot that God is not. Basic premise of a lot of new thought. That actually comes from Christian Science. It's kind of cool, right? And it's a truth in science of mind. It's a truth in unity teachings. It's a truth in Christian Science, of course. And it's part of our, there's only one. There is no spot that God is not, no matter what it looks like. Oneness are us. Oneness is us. No matter what our experience happens to be. And it's right here in our teaching symbol. That big circle, the center is everywhere and the circumference is nowhere. It goes to infinity in all directions. Can you wrap your mind around that? Some days not. But yet this is our teaching symbol. That outer circle is not a thing that's defined. It can't be. Because it goes forever in all directions. And we and everyone else are in that. And we live in that space of remembering our oneness with life, regardless of what our experience happens to be. So, okay, blah, there's that. So what do we do with that experience of separation? What do we do with that experience of duality? What do we do with our friends, evil and the devil and hell and opposition and otherness? What do we do with those? It's certainly our experience, right? But what do we do with those when we remember there's only one? How do we change our perspective to see that experience as an experience, but not the truth? The short answer is we made up those stories so we could learn what doesn't actually work for us. Dr. Holmes wrote it this way in The Science of Mind on page 109 and 110. We must know definitely and consistently that the universe is for us and not against us. But some will say, and I would say, and some will whine, the universe is not for us. Look at the evil, the limitation, the lack, the physical pain, the anguish of the human race. It really is that. He didn't put the whining part in there, but it's really in there. We shall have to learn that evil is neither person, place, nor thing, but is an experience which we are allowed to have because of our divine individuality, until through negative experiences we learn to use the law affirmatively, to cooperate with it, and thus to enjoy its true benefits. For the true law is a law of liberty and not a law of bondage. The universe is foolproof. It does not say we can have what we can take, while at the same time we must expect to experience. No, it does say we can have what we can take, while at the same time we must expect to experience the logical result of our thought and act, be it good or what we call evil. Man, I have a hair on my face. Okay, I got it. So now let's look again at the very long spiritual thought that Sharon read earlier from The Science of Mind, page 151. The secret of spiritual power lies in a consciousness of one's union with the whole and the availability of good. God is accessible to all people. If one makes themselves receptive to the idea of love, they become lovable. To the degree that they embody love, they are love. So people who love are loved. I have a caveat on that, but we'll save it. Whoever becomes receptive to the idea of peace, poise, and calm, whoever embodies these divine realities, finds them flowing through themselves, and they become peaceful, poised, and calm. There is a place in us which lies open to the infinite. But when Spirit brings its gift by pouring itself through us, it can only give us what we can take. So there's only one. We're all in it. And every single one of us has the opportunity to experience life however we do it. And our job, our challenge, our task, our opportunity is to decide how to see it and how to be it. And whatever decision we make is perfectly fine. We may choose to have a really crappy life or a really crappy experience. That's okay. It doesn't change the capital T truth that we are love. We are light, we are joy, we are peace, we are harmony. We just choose to have a different experience. It's like the story when, for some of you are kids, have kids or grandkids now. It's the story when your kids or your grandkids went out to play and they were playing with the neighbor kids. This is back when kids did that. Not so much now. But the kids would go outside and they'd play, and they'd play good guys and bad guys. Pick whatever kind of good guys and bad guys. When the kids were called into supper, Mom never said, Dad never said, were you a good guy or a bad guy? They said, did you have fun playing with your kids, with your friends? It's like that, because the divine reality knows it doesn't matter how you choose to play. The divine reality knows, did you get something out of it that was useful for you? Was it fun? Did you learn something? Was it beneficial to your awakening? So we have whatever experience we have. To whatever end we have it, the divine doesn't care. We are love. Like, you really want to do that? Okay, go ahead. Really? Doesn't say that. It's like, you're love, go live. So this is not the talk I started writing yesterday morning. That happens too sometimes. So yesterday afternoon, Maria and I attended an interfaith community coalition gathering called Dare to Care in support of LGBTQIA plus youth. That it was held at the St. Francis in the Foothills. And we didn't have any, important parts or anything. We were just there to listen and learn. And we heard a lot of stuff about how difficult it was to be a gender non-conforming youth in the world. And all of the challenges and the lack of support that they often, sometimes very often, experience in the world. And it comes at them from all directions. They don't get support at home. They don't get support at school. They don't get support from their churches. They get support from their friends. So the conversation is, can we change that dynamic? Can we create a reality where they do feel supported, where they do feel loved, where they do feel encouraged to be? And so I applaud this group, and we're part of it, so you'll hear more about it later. And it was really, really, really hard to sit there and feel that feeling of this experience of being mistreated, bullied, mislabeled, disrespected, kicked out, not allowed to, blah, blah, blah. And it was really hard to sit there and listen because it was just painful. And so it was really hard to feel encouraged by what I was hearing, by what we were hearing. And it was challenging because there is a gap. There's a chasm between what I know is the spiritual truth of every individual and what I recognize as everyone's physical experience. This is not that different from the gathering we had a couple months ago when we were talking about how we see the Roe v. Wade decision, right? And a handful of us gathered at the office to talk about how we can work it in our minds to see a different reality than the one that's being experienced. Remember, all this is happening in oneness. And the divine is not confused. We are. The divine is not. So all this is happening in the space of oneness, and yet we're having this experience that's certainly contraindicated by our belief system. So how do we change our minds about those experiences? And what's ours to do really? And how do we engage in creating that new way of being in the world that allows us and those that we come in contact with to have that uplifting experience that we know is the truth? There are lots of pieces to this puzzle, right? There's one that I shared with the Daily Morning Practice group yesterday. We used Dr. Ken Gordon's daily guide in the Science of Mind magazine. He quoted a snippet from Dr. Holmes from The Science of Mind, page 303. Here is that paragraph in its entirety. When Jesus said, "Resist not," he meant that non-recognition of evil is the only way to avoid it. This is true according to the law of cause and effect. For what we persist in recognizing, we persist in holding in place. What we persist in recognizing, we persist in holding in place. What we refuse to recognize, we neutralize, and it is no longer there. This is absurdly hard. When you're staring at something in the world that seems so contrary to your idea of what acceptable looks like. And yet, as religious scientists, as people who are practicers of this teaching, that's our job. That's our first job, to know the truth, to see that that experience that people are having is not the truth of who they are. And our job is to hold that truth in our minds. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say this. So the way a practitioner works, I wrote this in and then I took it out. The way a practitioner works, when you come to a practitioner with a trouble, with some trouble thing that's just got you wrapped around the axle, you go to the practitioner and you say, "I have this thing." And the practitioner says, "Tell me more." And if they're a good practitioner, they will listen and you will feel heard. And they will know there's not an ounce of truth in the words you're saying. So how do we, non-practitioners, that most of us are, how do we remember that we're staring at a world with lots of garbage thinking in it? And how do we remember the truth and this experience that there is not a word of truth in it? What does it take? Practice. Practice, 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 practice. Because we have what we need already in order to see a different reality. Because we know what we persist in recognizing, we persist in holding in place. So if we persist in holding in place, there is good here, and it will show up. That is what has to happen. So, a friend of mine who writes about brain neuroplasticity posted a thing this morning, and he made a case that grandmothers should run the world. His reasoning was that grandmothers had raised their own children and then had been around for their children to raise children, and so they had some wisdom. They had some life experience. They understood the bumps in the road and what was actually likely to be like a long-term problem. And so they had some wisdom and some guidance and some ability to see the capital T truth of the situation. He concluded by saying grandmothers have access to the 6 transcendent perfections out of the Buddhist teachings. What are those perfections? Generosity, discipline, patience, diligence, meditative concentration, and wisdom. Those things, those qualities live in us. Every one of us. We have those. We have those we can apply in our life, in our world, when things seem completely out of round. So, I'm going to ask Kylie to pause the talk in just a minute, because I want you to talk to each other. Because I want you to think about actions that we can do individually, and perhaps things we can do collectively, that will increase the experience of goodness in the world. How do we increase the experience of being love, of being loved in the world? Because there's just so much craziness for us to work with right now. We got plenty. So think about actions that are possible and reasonable for you to do. And talk to your neighbor. And if something really cool shows up in your mind, if you happen to write it down and stick it, put it in the donation box or hand it to me or send a note to the office, that's cool. Because we need to think about how we impact, how we make a difference where we are. And the only way to do it is our expression of being love in the world. So I'm going to stop talking now, and 5 minutes, talk to your neighbors. What do you got? So thank you for sharing with your neighbors. I look forward to hearing what you came up with. Because really, when we be love, that's how we reinforce love. That's how we bring more love into the world. That's how we align the experience. That divine presence that we know that lives as us. That's how we bring that into the world so that other people can have that same remembrance, that same experience. So I have a few more words from Dr. Ken's reading from the magazine yesterday, and then I'll close with a few words from Thich Nhat Hanh. First, from Dr. Ken. We've all seen pictures of pine trees growing on solid rock cliff faces, heard stories of animals overcoming incredible odds to return home, or people living in abject horror or terror who cling to survival. Nature is persistent, tenacious, and resilient. We are gifted with the same strain of life desires as everything else. When we put aside our opinions, fears, and misbeliefs, nothing can prevent us from pushing through any obstacle. Our problem is that we tend to believe we can't. But when we stop living in the past and living in doubt, we open ourselves up to our own innate ability to overcome. And then from Thich Nhat Hanh to close, from a little bitty book of his called How to Love. This is a variation on a meditation you've heard before, and I just thought it was stunning. It's adapted from method called the Path of Purification by Buddhaghosa, written in the 5th century CE. To begin, sit still and calm your body and your breathing. Sitting still, you aren't too preoccupied with other matters. Begin practicing this love meditation on yourself. Until you are able to love and take care of yourself, you can't be much help to other people. Here's where it gets familiar momentarily. May I be peaceful, happy, and light in body and spirit. May I be safe and free from injury. May I be free from anger, afflictions, fear, and anxiety. Next stanza. May I learn to look at myself with the eyes of understanding and love. May I be able to recognize and touch the seeds of joy and happiness in myself. May I learn to identify and see the sources of anger, craving, and delusion in myself. Next stanza. May I know how to nourish the seeds of joy in myself every day. May I be able to live fresh, solid, and free. May I be free from attachment and aversion, but not be indifferent. So that meditation is for yourself first. And after you are able to love and take care of yourself in this way, then we get to the juicy parts. Well, that's pretty juicy too. But the next step is practice knowing those same truths for other people. First with someone you like, then with somebody you're neutral to, and then with somebody you love. I had to think a minute about that. Why would you do somebody you love third? Because we have stories, we have history. People we love are hard sometimes. People you like, people you're neutral to, people you love, and then the real kicker, people you're not so fond of. Or in his language, someone the mere thought of whom makes you feel suffering. Just in case you don't get it. So, love yourself in those ways. Love those you like. Love someone about you feel neutral about. Someone you love but have stories about. And then somebody that really fries your bacon. And then, after practicing meditation, you may find you can actually think of them all with genuine compassion. Wouldn't the world be amazing if we could all see everyone else with genuine compassion? Can we make anybody else do anything? Where can we work? Right. Each one manages their own space, their own perception, their own way of being. That's how we change the world. That's how we experience and express oneness with all of life. We signed up for it. Go figure. Do that. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So now I'm going to do something that looks like affirmative prayer. I don't know what that means right now, but we'll find out in a minute. So if I said something useful to you, something that you could take home, a nugget that gives you courage or strength or the ability to remember the truth, hold that in your mind while I speak the words. There's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is my life now. That life is perfect. that life is also the life of all other beings. I know that life as driven by love, motivated by love. I know that life is expansive and inclusive, and allowing space for each individual, every individual, to feel loved, joyful, peaceful, poised, calm, powerful, and connected. So I remember this as a reality that I glimpse. It's a reality that I know in the deepest part of myself, even though it might not be my experience from moment to moment. There is a part of me that remembers this great big truth. God as love as me. And to see with my divine seeing, God as love as all beings. So I rest in that. I relax into the knowing and the remembering that I have access to this great good. I have access to this ability to see the world with God eyes and to increase the amount of goodness in the world by my decisions and choices and actions. I know this truth for myself and for all beings. And I know that everyone benefits when I act, when I do, and when all benefit when each one does. Resting in the truth of these words, I relax, allow, and let them be. And so it is.
So it is.